At 76, Richard Gere is still the perfect example of a Hollywood heartthrob. That sneaky smile, those romantic eyes, and the kind of charm that never needed a script to impress people. For decades, he was the dream guy, the mysterious drifter in American Gigolo, the rich businessman in Pretty Woman, the smooth-talking lawyer in Chicago. On screen, women fell into his arms. Off-screen, let's just say nobody ever doubted he had the same effect. In a recent interview, Gere was asked a question most actors avoid. Who were the women you secretly wanted? The ones you dreamed about but never had. And instead of playing shy, Richard leaned back, smiled that naughty smile, and told the truth. "You want the truth?" he said. "I'll give you the truth. 6 women, 6 actresses who could have had me any day, any time, no questions asked." He wasn't shy about it either. The names came out with passion, with humor, with a dangerous sparkle in his eye that showed even at 76, he still had those fantasies. Some were co-stars who created amazing chemistry with him on set. Others were famous women from his time that he never got close to but always wanted. And the way he said it left no doubt. "I'm not talking about crushes," Gere teased. "I'm talking about the kind of women you'd risk getting caught for. The kind who made me think if they ever shut the door behind us, I wasn't coming out until I'd used up all my energy." 6 names, 6 stories, 6 confessions from a man who built a career on romance. And at 76, he isn't afraid to admit just how many times he wanted to make fantasy real. Before we get into the list, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more juicy old Hollywood news. Number 4 and 6 on Richard Gere's list will truly shock you and caught a lot of fans off guard. He reveals some exciting feelings he's had for them. Very scandalous. Without further delay, let's begin. 1. Julia Roberts. The smile, the hair, the spark that turned Pretty Woman into a fairy tale and made Richard Gere the world's most envied leading man. He grinned when her name came up, shaking his head like the memory itself was dangerous. "Julia Roberts," he said slowly, almost enjoying it. If people thought there was heat on screen, they should have felt what was happening between takes. Audiences saw Edward and Vivian fall in love in a Hollywood fantasy. But Richard confessed there were moments where fantasy mixed with reality. Julia had this way of laughing that made you forget there was a camera anywhere in the room. She'd touch your arm or look at you with those big eyes and suddenly you weren't acting anymore. You were just a man trying not to lose himself. He admitted the chemistry was instant, the kind you don't fake. From day one, it was electric, the kind of spark where you think, "God help me if we're ever left alone too long." He chuckled low and mischievous. "And I'll be honest, if she'd ever signaled to me back then, we wouldn't have made it back to set on time. The crew would have been waiting." What made Julia so attractive wasn't just her beauty, though Richard didn't deny that. She was glowing, fresh, fearless, funny as anything. She wasn't trying to attract you, she just was. Every man within 10 feet felt it. He leaned closer, voice dropping. "People always ask if anything happened between us. The truth, what happened, is this. I spent months wondering what it would have been like if the cameras weren't rolling, and let me tell you, I wanted it bad." He laughed, shaking his head, that sly smile appearing. "Julia Roberts could have had me in 2 seconds flat, and I wouldn't have put up a fight." 2. Diane Lane, the forbidden flame, the woman who nearly burned down the screen with him in Unfaithful. Richard Gere's eyes lit up the second her name came into play. "Diane Lane," he said with a low laugh. "Now there's a woman who could undo you with just a glance. Every time she looked at me in a scene, I thought, this is trouble. And I want every bit of it." In Unfaithful, the story was about betrayal, temptation, the kind of dangerous passion that can't be contained. But for Gere, the danger wasn't just in the script. Diane had this sexiness that wasn't an act. It was natural, effortless. She could walk into a room and suddenly the air was thicker, heavier. You felt it in your chest. And then she'd smile, that half smile, and you'd be finished. He admitted that shooting those scenes together wasn't easy, not because of discomfort, but because the chemistry was too real. "There were moments," he confessed, leaning forward, "where I forgot where the script ended and my own imagination began." Diane would lean in close, whisper a line, and I'd think if she goes 1 inch further, we're going to have to stop filming for entirely different reasons. Richard shook his head, laughing at himself. She made me nervous, and that almost never happened. Not because I didn't know my lines, because I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd do if the cameras weren't there. He paused, eyes glinting with mischief. Let's just say this. If Diane Lane had ever decided to blur the line between acting and reality, I wouldn't have said no. In fact, I'd have thanked her. The host pushed him. Really? He leaned back, that signature grin spreading. Diane was temptation personified. You don't resist that. You just hope no one catches you giving in. 3. Michelle Pfeiffer, the blonde mystery. Ice and fire in one impossible package. Richard's grin widened the second her name was mentioned. Michelle Pfeiffer, he said, almost like he was confessing a sin. She was trouble. Beautiful, smart, dangerous in the way that makes you want to lean in even when you know better. From Scarface to the fabulous Baker Boys, Michelle's appeal was undeniable. Gere admitted he'd watched her glide through scenes and thought, God, what would it be like if she ever turned all that focus on me? She didn't need to move fast, he said. One look from Michelle and you were already halfway gone. She could peel you apart with those eyes. He remembered the way people on set talked about her, always with respect, always with a little fear. Michelle had this energy, cool on the surface, but you knew there was fire right underneath. You couldn't fake that, and every man around her felt it. Richard leaned back, chuckling darkly. If Michelle had ever leaned across a table, brushed my hand, and said, "Let's go," I'd have been out of my seat before the wine glass stopped shaking. She had that effect, the kind that made you forget where you were, who you were supposed to be, and just think about what would happen if she closed the door behind you. He admitted it wasn't just attraction. It was fascination. Michelle wasn't just a beauty. She was sharp, quick. She made you feel like if she let you in, you'd never look at another woman the same way again. That's dangerous. And that's exactly why I couldn't stop thinking about it. The host asked if he ever told her. Richard just smirked, that wicked, unashamed smirk. No, he said, but trust me, she knew. Women like Michelle always know. 4. Susan Sarandon, the rebel queen. Fiery, sharp, unapologetic, the kind of woman who didn't just walk into a room. She owned it. Richard's smile grew a little wild when Susan's name came up. Susan Sarandon, he said, voice dropping low. She wasn't just sexy, she was fearless. And that combination? That's deadly for a man like me. From Thelma and Louise to Bull Durham, Susan embodied a raw, earthy magnetism. Gere admitted it wasn't the kind of beauty you tiptoed around. It was the kind that dared you to step closer. Susan looked at you like she already knew what you were thinking. And instead of shaming you for it, she made you wonder if maybe she was thinking the exact same thing. He laughed, remembering the first time he saw her in person. There was this charge. You couldn't ignore it. She'd toss her hair back, give you that smirk, and suddenly every polite thought in your head went right out the window. Richard leaned forward, almost confessing. If Susan had ever asked me to sneak away, no matter the time, no matter the place, I wouldn't have hesitated. She had that energy, the kind that made you want to break rules, maybe even laws, just to keep her looking at you that way. What made her so irresistible wasn't just the body, or even the fiery wit. It was the danger of it all. She wasn't afraid of anything, he said. Not of speaking her mind, not of making you squirm, and definitely not of making you want her more than was good for you. The host teased him, asking if he could have handled her. Gere chuckled, eyes glinting. Handled? No, you don't handle Susan Sarandon. You surrender. And trust me, I would have happily raised both hands and given in. 5. Sharon Stone, the Ice Queen, the femme fatale, the woman who could cross her legs on screen and make an entire generation forget how to breathe. Richard let out a low whistle when Sharon's name came up. Sharon Stone, he said, shaking his head with a grin. She was pure danger, and every man I knew wanted to get burned. From Basic Instinct to Casino, Sharon owned her power. She didn't just play seductive, she weaponized it. She was bold, Gere admitted. She'd look right at you, dead on, and you felt stripped bare in an instant. It wasn't pretend. That was Sharon. Every look, every smile, it all carried heat. And God help you if she decided to turn it your way. He remembered being around her at industry events. That aura impossible to ignore. It wasn't just beauty. It was voltage. She had this sharp intelligence behind her eyes, like she knew exactly how much trouble she was causing, and she was daring you to walk straight into it anyway. Richard chuckled, leaning back. If Sharon had ever whispered my name in a quiet corner, I'd have followed her anywhere. Wouldn't have cared who saw. Wouldn't have cared about consequences. She had that kind of pull. And trust me, a man doesn't fight that. He just prays for more. What made her unforgettable, he admitted, was that mix of brilliance and boldness. She wasn't just sexy, she was fearless, and that's more intoxicating than anything. She could cut you down with a one-liner and then pull you right back in with a smile. That balance? It's lethal. When the host pressed if he'd have risked his reputation for her, Richard didn't even pause. That sly grin spread again. In a heartbeat, he said. Sharon Stone was worth the scandal. Heck, she was worth 2. 6. Sophia Loren, the goddess of Rome, the eternal flame. A woman whose very name still makes men weak. When Sophia Loren's name was dropped, Richard's smile turned softer but no less wicked. Sophia, he said almost respectfully. She wasn't just an actress. She was an event. Every man who ever shared a room with her remembers it for the rest of his life. And yes, I wanted her. Badly. For Gere, Sophia embodied the rarest kind of appeal. Not just beauty, but presence. She had this way of holding herself like the world bent toward her naturally. You didn't look at Sophia Loren. You were pulled into her orbit. And once you were there, you didn't want to leave. He admitted she was his ultimate fantasy, even when he was already a star in his own right. I'd be at some Hollywood function, surrounded by legends, and then Sophia would glide in. Instantly, every other woman vanished. It wasn't even fair. She had that much power in a single glance. And yes, Richard got blunt about it. If Sophia had ever whispered my name, I wouldn't have just followed her. I'd have run straight through fire, through glass, through anything. Whatever she wanted, I'd have said yes before she finished asking. What fascinated him wasn't just her sensuality, but her strength. She had that combination. Warmth, wit, and an iron core. You felt safe and in danger all at once. That's the deadliest combination a woman can have. He chuckled, shaking his head at the thought. People like to say she was untouchable, but if she'd ever let me touch her even once— He paused, eyes gleaming. Let's just say the cameras would have caught more than Hollywood was ready for.